now we need to start adding buttons and stuff, right? I think that's next. Yeah, add a button to each list item. So we could, inside render list item, create a whole bunch of new elements and stuff and keep appending them. And that's probably how you did it. But what's the fun in doing it a way we already know? So let's learn another fun new trick. How do we want this thing to look when we're done? Okay, so inside this UL, we're going to want an LI. I suppose it'll have a data attribute on it eventually. And inside the LI, we want the name of the thing, right? So let's put that in a span. Let's say span class equals flick name. Why not an ID? I mean, why? I'm sorry. Yeah, not a span. Why a class instead of an ID? Every single LI is going to have one of these, right? So it's not unique on the page. And then we'll put the flick name in there. So I'm putting it inside a span so we can target it more easily. And then we'll have a bunch of buttons. So maybe we have all the buttons together in some sort of container too. Let's see how we're going to do this in the end. So we'll say span, give it a class of actions so that we can tell these apart, because that's what these are. These are actions in here, and they're a bunch of buttons. So we'll have a button in there for fave. So we want to tell it apart from the other buttons, so we'll give it a class of, sure, how about fave? Oh yeah, and we learned button is a class in Foundation that'll make it look special. And we're going to be adding the remove button too. We can just go ahead and throw it in there. So we'll give it a class of remove and a class of button. So now we've got an LI that looks kind of like we want the LIs to look eventually. There's nothing in the flick name, but that's okay. And it'd be nice, just in case we have other LIs on the page somewhere at some point, it'd be nice to kind of say that this is a flick specifically, in case we want to style these LIs. We can just use the class flick to do so. Kind of tells what each one is. Yeah, Roy. So to tell them apart from other spans, because this is where the flick name is going to go, right? So if we want to style that differently, we need some way to target that with CSS, right? So I'm just giving it a class that identifies those. If I want all flick names to be styled the same, it'd be nice if I could have a class representing each one. And same with this group of buttons. Did you have a question too, Rick?
So wait, do you want us to like physically make them individually in the HTML, or just generating?
I'm just making one. I'm just making one. It's going to kind of represent how we want them all to look. So actually, kind of what I want to do is use this as a template for them. So I'm going to put a class on this LI of template as well. So flick space template, an additional class. I want each one to have that flick class, but I want this one that's just my kind of reference to have a class of template. It might be easier to style if we just have one of these here that we can mess with before we start generating them programmatically with JavaScript. Because every time you hit refresh, you'd have to enter a new one, right? So for right now, let's just keep this dummy one here, and I'll put some flick name in there so the flick name will at least show up. There you go. So I don't really want bullets in this list. Foundation, it just so happens. If we look under typography, I think helper classes, there's all kinds of helpers in there that we can stick on stuff. Aha, look over here. Unbulleted list. Add the class no bullet. Don't mind if I do. So on this UL, I will add a class of no -bullet. Did that work? Sure did. Now, it's not the best looking thing in the world just yet, but I can live with it for now. So I want to actually save myself the trouble of having to create a DOM structure this complicated every time. What I want to do is make a new copy of this every time I need to create the list item. What do you think about that? That sounds pretty nice, Dave. I agree. That sounds pretty nice. So where do we build this list item? In render list item, right? Oh yeah, I don't want this comment here. This is an example of why that comment isn't necessary. So instead of using document create element, I just want to make a copy of that one. So let's actually grab this template element off the page and keep track of it somewhere. So up in it, we store the list. Let's keep track of this this sort of list item template as well. This dot template equals document dot query selector. Well, since I'm already passing in an object full of selectors, let's add another one. Selectors dot template selector. So then I know I need to pass that in, right? So we have our form selector, our list selector. We already have the comma there. Now let's add the template selector. If we just sort of follow this pattern of sticking that template class on anything we want to copy, the one I'm specifically looking for here is something with both the template class and the flick class. So .flick.template would target that specifically. An element with both of those classes. In CSS, that's how you do it. So .flick would target something with a class of flick. If I want an element that has both classes, I say .flick.template. So now if I were to change the structure of my HTML a little bit, I know I just go to this one place to change all of those selectors. I know where to look. If we change it to an ID later, we just change it down there. Okay, great. So now I have a way to get the template. Let's make sure that worked. Refresh. Now I should have app.template, right? Oops. Template. Hey, There it is. So what I want to do in render list item is make a copy of that instead of creating the element from scratch. So this .template, and wouldn't you know it, DOM nodes have a method called cloneNode. Sweet. Makes a copy. Believe me? Here's app.template. Let's say let copy equals app.template.cloneNode. Copy. Yay, it's an LI with a class of flick template. Where the heck are my buttons? If we were to look up the documentation for cloneNode, it takes an argument, deep. So deep is a Boolean, true if the children of the node should also be cloned, or false to only clone the specified node. We left it out, which means it's undefined, which means it's false. So clone node true. Is that right? Are we reading this right? Copy equals, I don't want let now. Clone node true. Now let's look at copy. Yeah, now I got all the good stuff. Okay, so now it's a copy, and I do all this stuff to it, and I stick it on the list. I just changed from here to here. That's all I changed in the JavaScript. Refresh, add a new one. Where are my buttons is? Where my buttons is? I did refresh, right? Let's inspect this thing. LI, I have my data ID. I do not have my buttons is. Why not? Let's retrace our steps. We made a copy. We set the text content to flick.name. Ah. You know what text content does? It replaces all of the contents with the text we just put there. So we just blew away our dang buttons. So what do we want to do instead? So where does the name actually go? Oh yeah, inside this one span, right? We made a span for the flick name. That's the only part whose text content we actually want to replace. So in app.js, we still want the data set to be on the actual thing there. But we want to grab that span first. But we want to make sure it's specifically that span with a class of flick name, not any of the others on the page. So while we can do document.querySelector, you can also run querySelector on any element, and it will only search inside that element, not the whole page. So we could say item.querySelector, search for the selector .flickName, and set that thing's text content to flickName. So query selector, flick name, you know that, right? You understand that much. But instead of searching the whole document for something with that class, in fact, this thing isn't even on the document yet. We're just searching inside that one item. So if you already have grabbed another element and you want to search within that element for a certain selector, you can use that element.querySelector. And then I just want to change the text content for that span. Refresh, add a new thing. Yay, now I have my buttonses. And let's inspect this. Yep, it's inside the flick name span. We did it. But we don't actually want the template one to appear on the page, right? That's temporary. So we could in our CSS, maybe we add a rule, anything with a class of template, that means it's something just waiting to be copied. We say display none. Anybody happen to know the difference between display none and visibility hidden? Two different ways of making something not appear. Yeah.
One takes up space on the page. Visibility takes up space.
Right. If you say visibility hidden, it's still there, it's just hidden. And therefore, if it's taking up a bunch of space, it's still going to take up that space, and other stuff will kind of wrap around it. So there's sort of a placeholder for it there. We don't want it to do that. So we'll say display none instead. And then it's like it's not even there. It's still in the DOM. It's just not taking up any space. So refresh. Okay, it's not there. Let's add a new thing. Well, shoot, that's not there either. Why not? It still has the template class on it, right? So it doesn't appear either. So after we make the copy, we want to remove that class. How do I remove a class with JavaScript? Heck, how do I add one? There are lots of ways we could do this. Let's just grab anything here. Let's class of input group. Okay, now $0 is that thing with a class of input group. So say $0 dot class, class name, class list. So class name is that. So if we had more than one class, they would be in there separated by a space. So we could screw around with that string if we wanted to. That sounds like a pain in the neck. So what about class list? That sounded intriguing. It's an array looking thing. Sorta. So what if it had more than one class? Let's find something with more than one class. Let's find, here's our UL. Here's our template thing. There it is. So now it's $0. So $0 dot class name is this space separated thing. $0 dot class list is this array looking thing. It doesn't look exactly like an array. Number 0 is flick. Number 1 is template. Length is 2, but it has other properties too. DOM token list. Okay, let's look this thing up. So we can get in the habit, of course. Okay, Element.classList. Yeah, I didn't really want the Serbian version or whatever this is. I'm not sure how that happened. Check. It was check. Yeah. Element.classList is a read-only property which returns a live DOM token list. It's read-only. Shucks, we can't change it. DOM token list. Oh, it has methods, including add and remove. Cool. So we have flick and template. I could say $0 dot class list dot remove template. Heck yeah, I can. So how's this any different from an array? Well, here's the cool thing. If I already had template on there and I want to add it again, and I ran push, it would happily add it again. So then if I popped it off the end or something, it would still be there because there'd be another copy of it. But these add and remove things do it the way you would expect classes to work. If you remove a class, it's going to take it clear off. If you try to add one that's already there, it's not going to add it again. If we tried to like concatenate it onto a class name, it would add it again. So cool. It's the item itself, not the flick name thing, right? So we set the data set and all that stuff. Right after I clone the thing, first thing I'm going to do is item.classList.remove template. So the copy should not have the template class. Okay, so we know the copy's there on the page. But now if we try to add one, yay. We copy it, it shows up, it's got my buttons in it. Victory is ours. So, clone a template to build the list items. I don't know about you, but I find writing the HTML out to be a lot easier than creating it that way. And we're still dealing with DOM objects using cloneNode. Cool.